Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. My name is Michelle Goldsmith, although I know most of you that are in this room. I am the Vice President and General Manager of Soundings Trade Only Group. Today, we're really proud to unveil the results of the groundbreaking 2024 Global Workplace Study. It is the first time that a coalition of companies, associations, and media from across the globe have come together to research the people working within the marine industry. It's also the first time on this scale that employees had an opportunity to share their experiences, their desires, and their needs with us, and they had a lot to say. I'd like to thank the people that made this possible, many of whom gave their time and their expertise to make this happen. If you're in the room from one of those companies, please stand. Yamaha, MarineMax, IMTRA Corporation, Volvo Penta, NMMA, MRAA, our global partners, ICOMIA and Marine Industry News, and our research partners, Category 1 and P20. Second, some of the village of people who help with this research internally and externally: Amanda Phillips, who's here, Gary DeSanctis, Ellen Bradley, Melina Cordero, the members of the Women's Council, Abby Hymanson, Angela Pilkington, Kristen Fraunhofer, Liz Keener, Malin Schwartz, Michelle Daci, Stephanie Vadalaro, and Susan Bonovich. Finally, and most importantly, thank you to the more than 700 marine industry professionals who took the survey and those who participated in our focus groups. Oh, thank you.
Wow. Perfect timing.
Can you go to slide 2?
Breathe now, Michelle, breathe.
Thank you. So, as Simon Sinek says, start with your why. And although the marine industry has been discussing workforce for a long time, this is the first time that a global coalition has asked the workers what attracted them to their job, why would they stay, why would they leave, and what do they want out of their careers. So more than 700 people completed a 32-question survey, and more than that, a very large percentage of them shared their insights and opinions in open-ended questions. I don't know about you, but when I get open-ended questions in a survey, I pass them. We got a lot of commentary. So, of the 700 people, they took the survey in April of 2024. 60% were male, 40% were female, 20% were international, and 80% were from North America, from the US. There were a broad range of respondents, different tenures, different backgrounds, different functions, different positions, sectors, and locations. In July, we also did 2 focus groups, one male, one female, to further get into the details of what the survey was telling us. The report is organized into 4 sections. One is the current state of the workforce, then attracting talent, retaining talent, and developing talent. The information we are presenting today is available at tradeonlytoday.com/workplace-study. That will give you all the highlights that we'll share today, although we're going to give you a little bit more. And then there is a full report that you can download for a small fee. As I present this data, and our panel discusses some of the key points, we invite you to look at the data as we did, identifying our strengths and our weaknesses, and most of all, providing us with the awareness and opportunities to improve, grow, and prepare the industry for a successful future. We have a lot to go through in an hour and a half. I can tell you because we presented to these people, and it took the full hour and a half. But I'd like to introduce our panelists. Eric Breitmeyer, who is the president and CEO of IMTRA Corporation. Beth Garland, who, despite how Helene has affected her, is here as Senior Vice President of People Strategy at MarineMax. Matt Gruen, the president of MRAA. Kristen Fraunhofer, who is the president of CETO Services International, and Joe Lynch,
Hi.
the CEO of Icomia, otherwise known as the Where's Waldo of the marine industry. So, see if your clicker works. I think I have to be pointing at it. I have no idea, but we'll do this. There we go. About the respondent. Okay. So, there were 4 key characteristics that emerged about the current state of the workforce as we went through the data. The first characteristic, and we'll start on a positive note, is on job satisfaction. So the survey results show that people who work in the industry are engaged and passionate about it. In fact, 71% of the respondents strongly agreed with the statement, "I enjoy working in the marine industry." 75% either strongly agreed or agreed with the statement, "I'm very happy at my current job." This positive sentiment is further reflected in the high tenure of the industry, 14.4 years. I will tell you that it is less for women, and women did have some grievances with the industry, with 42% of employees having a tenure of 20 years or more. And if we look in context, we did look at several different ways. We used several different sources for context, Gallup being one of them. And Gallup, their average engagement across the globe in terms of engagement was only 23%, with 62% disengaged and 52% seeking new job opportunities. I can tell you that those seeking job opportunities of our respondents was far less than that. In fact, we had this comment, "Once you're in this industry, I feel like there's nowhere else I'd rather be." They talked about family. People were really, really positive. People that work in this industry are passionate about it, and they love working in the industry. So let's talk about the next characteristic, which is age distribution and its impact. 37% of our respondents were over the age of 55. 11% were over 65. If we look at the average age of different industries, we have everything up here from legal to real estate, finance, hotel, arts and entertainment. We skew much higher. So the median age of an industry employee is 49.5. I will say, Joe, that internationally it was 47.5, so you have some younger people. So, but if you look at the chart, clearly what's happening is that our group is aging out. And the way that we look at this is it's a two-edged sword. There's an opportunity and there's a challenge. The challenge is that in the next 10 to 15 years, there are a lot of people that are going to age out. They're going to retire from this industry. That's going to take with it a lot of tribal knowledge, and many of these people are in senior leadership roles. The opportunity is that we have people that are craving so much to move up within their companies. And we have this 10 to 15 year window to train these people to be the next generation of leaders. And in one of our focus groups, a man said, "We're losing so many people." I don't know who said tribal knowledge earlier, but you're losing. Every time somebody retires, if they've been there 30, 35 years, you lose all of that. So you need someone young, dynamic, and flexible to step in and absorb and pick up those attributes. So the third characteristic were wages and salary growth. And this was a bone of contention within the industry. If we look at salary, the largest percentage of respondents were between 50 to 75K in terms of what they made. And if you look at who makes under $100,000, it was 55% of the respondents. The respondents identified this as a significant weakness in the industry for both recruitment and retention. Many expressed frustrations with wage disparities for similar functions in other industries. And many said that it was a key motivator in how they decide on their jobs. So there are opportunities there. I don't want everybody to say, oh, well, I've got to raise everything and I've got to increase salaries. It's salaries and compensation packages. There are definitive things that Gen Z, millennials, and women want within the workplace, that it may be the full package that you present more so than having to raise salaries. The fourth characteristic are gender disparities. We know that there are considerable gender gaps and divisions within the industry. There are opportunities for improvement in attracting, retaining, and developing female talent. There is a wage gap. The wage gap is about 18% at the higher levels and 8% at the mid levels. In terms of workplace culture, we did hear from women that they felt excluded, that they felt that they had unequal access to promotions and advancement. And I think that in addressing these imbalances, it's going to be important for our segment and the workforce. We know that there's more than 58% of high degrees that are being done by women, that there are more women entering the workforce. So if we want to compete, we're going to have to understand what these women want and how to retain them within our industry. So, before we go into attracting talent, I'm going to ask some questions of our panelists. So, we talked about the age issue that we have 37% that are 55 years or older. You know, it is an exciting time because we've got this 10 to 15 year window to bring all this young talent up. So what I'd like the panelists to do, and I'm going to start with Beth, who's next to me, is to comment on your thoughts about the challenges and the opportunities that the older age of marine employees presents to the industry and how you think the industry should tackle them. And you said you can't put your head in the sand. Be intentional.
First line. Thanks, Michelle. And thank you all for being here today and coming to Tampa. We need your business now. So we're so happy to be a part of this. And that's right. I really firmly believe that no matter where you are in the marine industry, you can't put your head in the sand. We're all aging. Thank goodness. We're all going to be here a long time, we hope, but we're all going to keep getting older. And MarineMax is no exception. 51% of our team members are Gen X and baby boomers. So that means half of our team members pretty much are millennials and Zs, and alphas are coming right behind them. And we have to pass on our knowledge, all of us do. And we have to be intentional about it. We have to really consider programs, both formally and informally. Some things are just as simple as start writing down how you do things. I know that sounds crazy, but if you don't have a build for your boat, a boat book, how are you going to know what to do? How do you pass it on? Some people learn visually. Some people want to learn side by side, but sometimes you have to teach new things in a new way. We also need to be really intentional about listening to our team members. The generations that are younger than, say, me, have so much to bring to the table, but those new ideas can be scary, and they aren't the way we've always done something. And so let's give people a chance. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's a one-off pilot, but maybe it's a way to stretch someone's leadership ability by letting them run with something. Do it one place. Don't do something that's going to change your whole business, but give a chance to try a new idea or try something else. And don't discount what your new friends, your younger friends might bring to the table. It's really important. And then one thing we all have to do, and we could all do better, MarineMax included, is be more intentional around succession planning. And I don't just mean for your CEO, I mean for every role. And I think it's really hard to start those programs, but it can be as easy as identifying who's your leader now and who's the person right below him that you want to keep cultivating. and making sure every year or two, it doesn't have to be every day, it doesn't have to be every month, but every year or two, you're checking in. What's a development plan for that next layer of leadership? Talk to them about it. What do they want to do? How do they want to grow? And start tracking the work that they're doing. What certifications are people gaining? What trainings are they attending? What big project did they handle? And start tracking it. If you don't have an HRIS system that you can track it in, keep an Excel spreadsheet. Again, nothing has to be that fancy, but just being intentional about it. And then if it seems too much to do that across your organization, start with one role. Maybe you're head of accounting. You're really worried if that person retires and only 33% of the accountants that used to be in accounting programs are taking those programs now. That's a big challenge for all of us. There are not enough accountants in the world. Start identifying that. How are you going to help someone in your company gain the skills and the experience they need? And build from within if you can. That's always a better solution if you can make it work.
Great advice.
Thanks.
Great advice. And Eric, you and I have had conversations about succession planning, about building your bench.
Yep.
And I know that you run an ESOP company, and I think part of succession planning, especially for people that are in higher leadership roles, is what am I going to do with my company? Is there someone within the family that's going to take it over? Is it something that I want to sell? And I don't think a lot of people really dive into what an ESOP could do for them. And I know that it's been...
Say what it means.
Oh, so an ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan. We created the ESOP 3 years ago and sold 100% of the company to our employees. It was a great ownership succession process for the company, but it's also presented a ton of great opportunities for us to build our staff of the future. We have a number of senior people that are getting closer to retirement, and I think the new ownership structure has presented a really clear path for some of our younger people to see that there are opportunities for them to grow in the business. We've been trying to develop more training opportunities, and not just kind of internal training programs, but also presenting opportunities for our leaders of the future to participate in executive education or other outside training programs, even sending more people to ABYC programs or other things. We've found that sort of investment in people's future development is a nice counter. I mean, more money is more money, but at the same time, there are other things that make people's job experience more compelling, and us investing in their development has been a big way for us to kind of prepare for the future.
Well, and you saw it with you. You said that executive education that you had gone to, it had a major impact on you. Yeah,
we have a lot of people at IMTRA that have been there a long time, so while we know a lot about us, sometimes our view of what's kind of outside the boat is not as clear. And so my own personal experience when I was making the transition into becoming the CEO, investing some time in that executive education where I was learning from leaders, emerging leaders from sometimes much bigger companies, Fortune 500 type companies, was really eye-opening to me, and was incredibly engaging, really kind of fired me up for what the opportunities were going forward. I think another really easy process that works kind of at any size company, if you have more senior people that are getting closer to age out, just internal mentoring programs where you pair a younger worker with someone more senior, and whether it's even directly in the same job, like they're going to succeed them, but even kind of taking someone under their wing and help them see the areas that maybe a younger person's day-to-day job they don't get to see as clearly, but by partnering them with someone else, they get to see, oh, I can follow this path and I see some opportunities for me.
That's great. I'm going to hold off on asking questions about wages and gender disparities. What we found is as we went through attract, retain, and develop is that there were overlaps. So you'll see it further on as we go through the discussion. And I'm going to go into attracting talent and give you some information about that. So our main overarching theme here was prioritizing attracting the next generation of talent by adopting new strategies for recruitment and rethinking how, where, and when we seek candidates. So keep in mind that today we're just going to give you some of the highlights, some of the aspects of the findings, So if you download the report, you can get all of it. There's no way in the time that we have with a panel discussion that we could get through all of it, but you can go to tradeonlytoday.com/workplace-study and see it all. So what we did is we asked across everyone who answered for what aspects were most attractive to them in terms of workplace features, in terms of the benefits packages that were offered, and the cultural elements of the company. So across all generations, salary and compensation were number one. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. However, when it came to corporate culture, and honestly throughout, as a thread throughout this entire study, the importance of supportive and effective leadership was crucial to everything within the company. It was one of the most critical factors. It was followed by mutual respect among employees, recognition and appreciation of employees, and a commitment to fairness and equal opportunities. If we break out the findings by gender and by age, which is all in the full report, in general, women gravitated toward more flexibility and fairness, whereas younger generations, the millennials and your Gen Zs, were more concerned with the job content, job growth, and the opportunities, and of course, work-life balance. One of the glaring findings in the attract section is how unaware people are of the marine industry as a career and the wide variety of jobs within the marine industry. In fact, we spoke to a director at a boat company in the Midwest who said, I can just say that when I was in high school, I drove past a boat manufacturing plant every single day. I had no idea. I was completely oblivious. I just knew what it was called. I didn't know there was an actual career for me there. So when I got in the industry, that was one of the things I really wanted to get involved with, is to make sure that local schools were aware that this is a real viable job. In fact, some of our focus groups said that high school was too late. They are going into middle schools to attract talent. So, on attracting talent, I have some questions for the panel. So there was a clear message in the data about the lack of awareness of the marine industry as a career and about the wide variety of jobs. And my question is, how do you think we can improve that? How can we promote the industry, which is what the data told us people highly enjoy working in, that we showcase a wide variety of opportunities that are available. So Joe, I'm going to go to you, and you talked about values-based organizations with me and spoke about how we could promote and collaborate and the different routes that people can have into the industry.
Yes, and I think probably anybody that was involved in marketing knows that to promote a product or even a career to the next generation, you have to be talking a different way. We need to be explaining what a wonderful industry this is and what a positive difference it makes to society. There's a lovely quote in the report, I don't just build boats, I'm delivering dreams. I know that the work I'm doing makes a positive difference to our customers.
Yes.
That's the sort of value-based decisions that the next generation will find really, really important. We can't use that as an excuse to not pay properly.
Yeah.
That's inexcusable. But talking about the benefits that we create for society, that we're not just here for the rich or the elitist or the special, I think is really important. And then the second thoughts I had were that we are a very unconventional but very sticky industry. The fact that we're all here on a warm afternoon investing our time to make the industry better is a good sign. At the Hall of Fame Awards this morning, we heard different stories of how people fell into the career. I never had a plan to fall into the marine industry, and I bet everybody here has a unique story of how they've got to where they are. Other industries are quite linear if you're going to be an accountant, you know which steps you have to go through. To be a doctor or an engineer, you go along the path, whereas we skip and change all of the time. And I think we should do a better job of explaining that and celebrating it and making it easier for people to think, well, if I start work as a marina receptionist or a boat designer or a boat laminator or an accountant within a small boatyard, where I'll end up, I don't know. But we need to make it easier, and I think probably by publishing case studies of people who have got to very senior successful positions in the industry without the formal career path. They've just got in. Our industry is a great meritocracy. If you're good, you'll get on and you'll go a long way. So we need to make it easy for people to see those stories, I think, and also to make it easy to navigate that having done 3 years doing this job, I've accrued these skills and experience. That will take me there, with or without a formal qualification. We're having the discussion on the international stage. How do we make qualifications earned in one country recognised and valuable in another? That's going to be a great way of retaining talent. So I think, to summarise, it's talking about the values and the benefits of our industry, and then it's celebrating the complex but myriad opportunities that people follow in unconventional routes and making that easy to understand, and that will help people think, oh yes, this is the industry for me, not just for a summer job, but for the next 30 years.
And I'll tell you, last year at the Mets Trade Women in the Industry panel, Michelle Hildyard from Ray Marine spoke about the fact that she's a non-technical person that was leading product development for a very technical company. And I think people get into a mode where they think they have to have these technical skills to be in the marine industry, but there's such a wide variety of jobs, from IT to manufacturing to marketing to
HR.
It's not that you have to be a technical person to work in the marine industry.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Kristen, you had a really interesting idea about getting involved with the Boys and the Girl Scouts.
I mean, this is a simple one, but you said it earlier, like, you know, is middle school too late? Get to people young. We're a big company in a relatively small town, and over the years, we've had scout groups come to us and say, hey, we need to earn a badge in navigation, or we need to earn a badge in radio operation. And guess what? We had a whole room filled with VHF radios. So you welcome the scouts in, teach them how to use a radio. All of a sudden they learn. Meanwhile, they're in our office, seeing the call center, seeing the marketing team, like introduce them to everyone, and they start realizing, wait a minute, there's a lot more here. Now I know what the big yellow building happens. You know, and whether it's Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, you could help fulfill a badge or something along the way. And the same applies to internship programs and getting involved in the schools. Our high school has a pretty robust business program. They came to us years ago and said, hey, could we do a day in the office kind of thing? And we welcome people in and they see it and bring people back for internships. We had someone who worked in our call center when she was in high school, I think, and starting into college. Then actually during college contacted us and said, can I do a marketing internship? We said, sure, no problem. She came back and did that. And while she didn't come back to us after the fact, she is working in a local marine business. But she liked she's working in a local dealership. So it was one of those where she said, I like this and I like this environment. I understand there's more, and stayed in there. So it is engaging people younger, and we've seen that over time, that if we engage with them when they're in high school, when they're in college, we tend to keep them.
Yeah, and Eric, you were talking about maybe tapping into Discover Boating and doing a PSA that way.
Well, I think, Discover Boating's doing a really good job of using kind of new media techniques to reach, potential new boaters, people we want to bring into the industry. I wonder whether we could use some of those same methodology and techniques as a way to communicate it as a job opportunity, not just as a social fun activity for your family. And I totally support all that we've heard about. Even as a small company, you might only be in one location. Find out what programs are going on in your area and see how you can engage with them. We work closely with the Landing School, we're in Massachusetts, but the Landing School's in Maine, and the International Yacht Restoration School's in Newport. And we bring a group of some of their groups in every year to do training programs in our building, and not just to have them get exposed to our products directly, but also for them to see kind of there's more to the marine industry than fixing engines or laying up fiberglass boats. That, like you said, we need accountants and we need people who work in the warehouse. And we have a lot of people that work for us that don't come from the boating lifestyle. And I think if we want to continue to grow boating, depending on finding people who loved boating as a kid really is limiting to us. But I think we can do it both ways. If you have people that are working in your business that aren't boaters, can you get them on the water so that they get that bug? But also, how can you interface with the different programs? I bet if you look around, there's a high school that's got a technical program. Can you host some of the kids to come and see what's going on in your business? And like you said, it doesn't have to be a marine, engine repair program.
Right.
It could be any sort of business program, but get them exposed to what the marine industry can offer. I started at IMTRA in 1988, thinking I was going to do it for a year. I was going to be a school teacher, but I thought I'd have a real job for a year. And it's been 35 plus years that I've been there, and I didn't plan it out. Like you said, it just kind of happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask, I'm going to start with Beth and then go to Matt, but we're in a post-pandemic world, and I'm wondering what you've noticed, the changes that you've noticed in talent attraction, recruitment space over the past few years. Is it different than before the pandemic, largely the same? And how is technology changing how and where you recruit? And I know you said that you're doing an apprentice program.
Yes, I can mention that too. So at MarineMax, the pandemic just opened our eyes that we didn't all have to be together in the same space every day. We'd love to be together. We wish everyone could, but you can't always find a HubSpot engineer in Clearwater, Florida. And you have to look somewhere else. So we started recruiting around the country, and technology enables that. I mean, every job is posted nationally now, everywhere. People can find you anywhere. And we had to then use technology tools to stay in touch. So we couldn't find a payroll manager in Tampa during the pandemic. So we found one in Houston. Worked out great. She gets to live where she wants to live. We bring her in every now and then so she has those connections. She still attends all our daily meetings. We have morning stand-up meetings where we talk about values. You can incorporate folks far and wide into those. You don't have to leave people out just because they're not there, but you can find the best talent for what you need done. And that was great for us. We can't do that everywhere though, in a store, in a marina. We need people in person. And so we have to be a little more open to technology, having people in the right place. But I did want to mention, you also want to be careful with technology because now people can apply to 50 jobs at one time.
Yeah.
Anywhere they want, just with a click of a button on Indeed. So it can waste a lot of your time with applicants that aren't really qualified. You have to be very rigorous in the way you review those. And then we've seen for the first time applicants using ChatGPT to answer our online questions. That was a shocker too.
So you're
yes.
getting similar answers?
Well, you can run them through a filter and see if it's a kind of AI type of answer, and if all of a sudden they're very terse in some answers and then they're super loquacious and answer 6 paragraphs in one, you might want to check. And so we've seen kind of the ups and downs of technology. So the personal contact matters, no matter if you're talking to them on the phone or through Zoom or bringing them into your office. Make sure you meet people and get to know them before you hire them. And then, yes, we did at MarineMax start a new apprenticeship program. We've had a service apprenticeship program for a very long time, partnering with a local school in Orlando, and that was great. It would bring people from that school to our locations to train. Service is a real worry for all of us, like getting new people into the industry that want to work with their hands and fix boats and repair boats and build boats is a real challenge. So we partnered with the state of Florida, and we have a more formal new program that's allowing people from any industry, they don't have to go to a technical related school, can come into our program. It's a 2-year program. It's super formal. We have online training that we've developed. We also have in-person training, but they learn on the job as well. So not just side by side watching someone, but actually doing and earning credit hours. And then a formal mentoring program is part of that. And not just a mentoring program that we match people up, but the mentors have to go through classes to learn how to be a mentor, how to follow the guidelines we've given them for each week of the program. And then that way people are learning formally from someone that's been in the industry a long time, but also has done the work and is there for them. What I will say is we're only doing this in Florida. We want to expand it across the country. And one thing you can do is tap into state resources. We've gotten funding from the state of Florida to help support this program. It means you do a lot of paperwork, but it's out there for anybody. You don't have to be a big company. Anyone can apply for these kind of programs as long as you set it up appropriately and you're willing to do the work to report on it.
That's great. Matt, you've hired several new people, and I'm wondering, how did changes affect how you sought after staff? What, if anything, was different about what they asked you during the hiring process?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll look at this from a couple different vantage points. We spent the last couple days with our board talking about some of the pains and challenges that are out in the marketplace for our dealers. And some of that, what we identified is that there is this challenge with them understanding how to find, recruit, and retain, right? And so when we talk about what's changing, what we know is changing is both the people that are doing the hiring, we're getting older, right? And the people that we're hiring are getting younger, right? And so when I came in the industry, I also started in the marine industry in '88, by the way, and left and then came back. But Gen X, we were known as the lazy generation, right? And so now, or for the last few years, that tag has been on the millennials, and I think now we're trying to move that to Gen Z. So we're challenged with understanding how to hire and how to meet and understand the needs of people. So when we've been doing our hiring, what we found is exactly what you were saying, Beth, is that the digital applications it's a horrible experience, because what happens is, we're very specific in our job ads, where we say we want a cover letter explaining why you think you're a good fit for this role. We want a resume, and we want, if you're so inclined, send us a 30-second video.
Wow.
We get about 5%, maybe, that might be an exaggeration, who follow the
They
instructions.
asking for a cover letter?
Yeah,
Oof.
yeah. And it's most of the people just do a quick apply, and then you have to sort through it. And then when they do their quick apply, the best part is, when you think about this from what you're doing when you're applying for a job is you're branding yourself. It's a personal brand, right? And most of these people just name their resume, right? So when you download a bunch of resumes, you're trying to figure out whose is.
That's
yeah.
hilarious. Yeah.
And so it is a real challenge, and it's something that I think, Beth, you used the word intentional earlier, and being intentional about how we do this, and I think that's the key thing, is you have to be intentional about what does your hiring process look like in order to find and sift through the candidates that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Flexibility and work-life balance were aspects of the workplace that women desire. And Joe, you said to me, it's more than just women.
Yep.
My curiosity is, how would you incorporate these aspects into the workplace, or suggest to the industry how they can? I know that it's difficult because we have manufacturing floors. I used to run ops in a manufacturing company, but I think that there's some opportunities with flexibility within time sharing or sharing, shifting time shifts. So I'm curious about some of the ideas that you had, Joe.
Thank you. Yeah. So flexible working now is increasingly common, but I think we tend to fall into thinking about it in just one dimension, working from home or working on site. But I think if we're imaginative, there's a lot more flexibility we can offer. Now, obviously, it depends on the job. If you're running a production line, you can't have half of the production team going home at 3 o'clock. But for most of our jobs, we don't work like that. What is the natural flow of the workload during the day and throughout the year? And I've had a lot of success in this and current and previous roles where we have a school day working rota, so that parents, whether they're male or female, can do the school run, do the pickup, and then they come into the office at 9:30 and leave at 2:30. We've also done it across the year, depending on the type of business you're in. Some of you will have busy summers, some of you the summer will be quieter. Well, why don't you offer extended holiday so that parents can be at home during the school holidays, or vice versa? And I think my fundamental belief is that if you treat your colleagues as adults and trust them, they will reciprocate that. They'll behave like adults and work hard for you. And that flexibility, for us, again, it depends on the type of job. Don't phone me up to ask if you can leave 5 minutes early to go to the doctors. Just go. Mm-hmm. Because I know in 2 weeks' time you'll be working late in the evening, or you'll have gone home, put the children to bed, you've got an hour's peace and quiet, and it might suit you to do that work in the hour in the evening when it's peace and quiet. Great, make it work for you. But I think trust people and challenge what's been the traditional working model. Is it still relevant for the jobs that you need?
Well, and ultimately, I think we all know if people are productive or they're not, whether they're in the office or they're not. Either the work is getting done or it's not getting done. So I'm going to go on to retaining talent. This was very interesting. So yes, we had a lot of people that responded that they had satisfaction within the industry, but we did have situations of burnout, lack of inclusion, insufficient resources, which was really big, and unsupportive leadership that were identified as areas for improvement. Again, it came through in multiple ways how critical supportive leadership is within companies, and that we had people that said leadership is the source from which culture flows. And it really underscores the need for us to make that next generation of leaders ready as others age out. So throughout the study, we went through some of the top areas of satisfaction and dissatisfaction. And again, I'm going through the highlights. There's a lot more detail. It's broken out by age, by gender within the full report. But the top sources of satisfaction were an interesting role and responsibility, manageable work-life balance, and feeling valued for their contributions. The top sources of dissatisfaction were having proper resources within the job, onboarding. We as an industry are lousy at onboarding employees, and a fair and competitive benefits and salary package. In terms of who's considered leaving their jobs within the next year, 40% of millennials and Gen Z said that they were interested in leaving their jobs, while only 29.8% of employees age 45 and older said that they were interested. The numbers are higher for women than for men. Almost 10% more women have thought about leaving their job than the men. I think you'll find this next slide very interesting. I know that I did. I want to share with you what we found in terms of challenges and bias. And what we asked was, have you experienced any of these challenges in the workplace within the last year? That was it. Now, we expected that we would hear, some of this more on the female side, honestly, is what I expected. However, 58% of men have experienced these challenges as well. 72% of women, 58% of men. So key takeaways here, it's not just a female problem. And second, although it's difficult to quantify, my suspicion is that a lot of this is unintentional. However, we have new generations coming into the workforce, times have changed, and the behavior and language that someone my age might just brush off, someone who is in a millennial or a Gen Z may not tolerate. So the key here is to understand the way that leaders interact with employees. How we connect and how we communicate and use language is really important, and we need to be more self-aware. Interesting, huh? So my first question to the panel on this is I want to address this slide. So there were some surprises here, obviously 58% of men. the opportunity is in awareness. We know that Millennial and Gen Z are going to be less tolerant. How do you think leaders can look at this information and be more intentional in their interactions and in the way that they use language? And how do you think that leaders can shape better cultures? That's my question. And Matt, I'm going to start with you. You had an example of communication and miscommunication between generations that happened in your company.
Yep. So I'll come back to that example and I'll share that real quick. But I think, Joe, you said earlier the quote that you read about building dreams, right? So this is a great thing about this industry. We deliver dreams all the time, and we can talk about that as a benefit of working in this industry, but it's also an accountability, right? This workforce challenge is a customer experience problem, because as we're losing people or not able to attain people, we can't build dreams. We can't repair their dreams and get them back on the water, and so it's something that we need to take extremely seriously. And as new people come in to the roles that we have them coming into, and to your question, you know, we talk about career development in our organization through the lens of what we call balconies. Okay, so balconies, so think of a balcony. The higher the balcony you're on, the further you can see, and the longer the trajectory of your view and your understanding of what's happening. And you might come in as somebody out of college, and you're on basically balcony 0, and you've got no view. You understand you understand what you bring to the table, and that's about all you understand. And as you're in there, in the role for a while, and you grow, you start to understand your position a little bit better, and your balcony view is further out. And then you understand your department and how you fit into the department, and then the organization, and so on and so forth. And so we think about that, and it's important for us internally, because we can then start to coach people through how they grow in those balconies. And the example I'll give you is a personal example. When I restarted my career in the marine industry, it was in the magazine business. And a colleague stopped by literally on day one, and he said, if you want to grow in this organization, pick up the phone and start calling people who work in this industry so that you understand what's going on. And it was the best advice I'd ever had, because it's one thing to be able to understand as a magazine person how to write an article and edit an article and that sort of thing. It's completely different when you know your industry and understand and can speak to the readers a little bit better. So that example was an example of a balcony situation where somebody made a decision, didn't have the understanding of how it would impact, you know, the rest of the organization or maybe some of our partners and that sort of thing. And we had to then coach and say, hey, this is why we need to understand this, and this is why we need to regroup on the decision.
Yeah, interesting. Eric, you brought up doing a perception audit, a third-party audit.
So, yeah, I mean, I think people don't leave jobs, they leave supervisors. And I think it can be very easy to have your own evaluation of the way you approach that. When we were going through this succession plan a dozen years ago that ultimately ended up in me being CEO, we did a pretty in-depth 360 analysis, and sometimes those can be eye-opening in terms of people being really honest about how you can come across. And I think that what I learned in that process, well, I learned some really specific stuff that I could work on, but also it's that ability to try and step outside yourself, and are you asking people, how am I coming across? And sometimes we have a large-ish leadership team, and while I've been working on my presentation, there's still times when I have a rough edge, and I've encouraged my entire team, like if we have a meeting in which they perceive that I'm being too hard on someone, or someone give me the feedback, like I need to do that. And one of the things that I've learned is being able to say you're sorry or you wish you'd approach something, but having that kind of humility to be willing to acknowledge a mistake and be human and kind of say, look, this was the reason I approached it that way. But I think that always trying to look at yourself from the other person's viewpoint, which is not always easy, and sometimes in the moment it's really hard, but I think it's something that is very helpful. I think an add-on to that is Do you have someone that can be an objective third party? Do you have a leadership coach, or do you have someone within your management, your whatever team you're in? It doesn't really matter how high you are up in the organization, that can be another set of eyes and give you that feedback that maybe the recipient of a communication or an interaction isn't willing to go, hey, you made me feel bad. Someone else can go, hey, I think you were hard on that person, or I think you didn't give them the credit they deserved. That sort of feedback, and this works throughout an organization, and we're really trying to embrace this, especially with our emerging leaders. Like, hey, just because you're a leader, it doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you're flawless. And you're going to make mistakes, and that's human, but it's also okay to acknowledge it. And that sets up a culture of accountability at all levels, where people think about how they're coming across to each other and how that they can do that in a way that is, sometimes messages need to be delivered, but they also need to be done in a way that's respectful and humane.
True. I'm a big fan of the 360 review as well, and I can tell you that it completely changed how I dealt with internal staff after it was done, and it was a decade ago. Kristen, you also had some things to say about this and about empowering the younger generation and knowing what to brush off and not to brush off, and getting the younger generation to speak up as well. You spoke to me about.
Absolutely. I mean, you said it before with, as much as I like to think I'm 30 years old, I fall into that over 50 category. And I think we just we brush things off. In my 20 plus years in the industry, I think only once have I actually had someone intentionally mistreat me because I was a female, and it was clearly, Cindy got to witness it. But, otherwise I think it's not intentional. And even myself, and you said sometimes I have a rough edge, I sometimes have a rough edge. I think we need to be very intentional on, you said, like really looking at ourselves and what are we saying and how we're doing it. It's not unusual, to walk around a show like this, and men walk up to each other and it's like, hey, how you doing? Good to see you, excited. And then walk up to us and it's, hey, girls, hey, sweetheart, hey, darling. And those words matter. I know that it's meant as a term of endearment, but used in a group, another generation might say, no, sorry, not appropriate. And I think that's where we all kind of need to watch what words we're using. Language matters, and it can be a little bit harder for some of us who are older. But it's very important that if someone feels like, hey, that makes me uncomfortable, that they can speak up. And I think that's important to have that culture. You said it very well, Eric, of like, whether it's that person relaying the message or someone else, like being able to speak up and say, like, this made me uncomfortable and here's why. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think anyone's most people are not intentionally meaning to do this. But it helps us become more self-aware of what we're doing.
Right. And there's an additional dimension to that culturally, especially if you're working in an area where you are recruiting people from diverse backgrounds or have an international workforce. Mm-hmm. Behavior that is common and acceptable maybe here. Mm-hmm. In other parts of the world, you have to behave very, very differently, and you need to be training yourself constantly. Okay, what's appropriate or what's inappropriate for this cultural setting that I'm in today?
I agree with you there. And there are idioms and ways of using language that don't translate. I spoke to a couple of you about what you've done innovative in a post-pandemic world that has impacted people in retention. And Eric, you had talked about the impact that going to an employee-owned company has had on your employees and what it's done for retention. Do you want to include the audience on
Sure.
what you've found?
Retention is super important. I mean, the cost and the time that it takes to train up new people is incredibly expensive, and the ESOP has been an excellent tool for us, both in retention. We had a pretty successful path on that even before the employee ownership, and I think we had a culture in place that felt like everyone who was an employee felt like an owner, and when we made the conversion to employee ownership, it was kind of like, okay, we're going to put our our money where our mouth is, and we're going to make it real. And I think that's been really compelling. I think it's also been an amazing attraction tool when we're looking to hire new people. It's amazing how many people have been, we really promote the fact that we're employee owned in our hiring process, and how many people have been attracted by that. What does it mean? How does it work? I mean, some of it gets a little mechanical, but at the same time, I think the whole idea of like, wow, I can develop equity in this business, I can be an owner in the business, has been incredible in terms of the ability to keep our people and make them see that this is a place that they can spend a career, and that they have, it also presents opportunity, that we aren't just going to sell out in a couple of years. I mean, we had I had a perceived problem prior to the ESOP conversion of like, you get people in the middle of their career and they can kind of see that something's going to change. So I was getting older, the other owners were getting older, so it's like, well, something's going to happen. Like, how am I going to be protected? Like, if I stay here and all of a sudden someone's in their early 50s and the company gets sold, how do they know if they're going to still be part of it? When we made that shift to employee ownership, it kind of showed people a path like, oh, okay, that big change is never going to happen. We're now on this path, so I can invest more time and energy. I know I'm going to be here. We even had someone during the pandemic who'd been with us for 15 years, decided to go and try something else. They'd felt that they were in a little bit of a rut. And this was before we even did the ESOP. And they left, and what they realized, it was a bit of a grass is always greener situation. They left for 9 months, and I was really concerned. It was kind of it must have been right before we did the transaction, because it was in COVID, and I was like, uh-oh, is this the great resignation starting to happen in Intra? Like, I was like, I thought we were immune. Holy cow, I didn't think Derek would leave, and about 6 months later, I was like, hey, can we get together for lunch, and how is it going? And he was like, well, it's different. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound. And he was like, well, I don't feel like I have access to the decision makers anymore. I'm in a bigger organization. We're all spread out. It was, more remote. And he was like, I don't know if this will be the thing. And I was like, are you interested in coming back? And he was like, well, yeah, let's talk about it. And we ended up bringing him back. And it's been a great example, I think, for the rest of our team of like, oh, I don't need to get wanderlust about going somewhere else, that I can find a home here and really make it settle in.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we learned through the data that security and stability are definitive aspects of a job that people are looking for. And I was surprised how many of the millennials and Gen Zs thought that way. So really, really interesting. And Matt, do you want to chime in? There were things I think that you were working on some of the dealerships with this.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that we've been innovative or there's any innovation that we've added to this, but I think a lot of it comes down to doing the fundamentals and doing them the best that you can. We've been on a pretty good growth trajectory. It puts all kinds of new pressures on your culture and on your staff and leadership team and that sort of thing, and it's really important to be aware of those pressures and to manage to them. It's equally as important to build or to protect your culture as it is to build. So when you see things going off the rails, you got to address it as quickly as possible. That's something that we've learned the hard way. I also think, so with our dealers, we do an employee satisfaction survey through our dealership certification program. And we started, I want to say it was 4 or 5 years ago, we started taking that survey and doing it internally, and have learned a lot. And it gives us really a to-do list on like, hey, here are some things that we can do to improve the culture and improve upon what's happening within the organization. So I think just really getting to the fundamentals of asking your team members what you can do better and that sort of thing, and then acting on it.
Absolutely. I think the opportunity is there for us to improve, and I think that the opportunity is there for us to get better retention within our groups. So I'm going to go on to developing talent, because I know that you're all sitting here in this hot room, and I've seen people leaving, so I want to make sure that I get through all of this with you. This is the last section. So we did ask about developing talent. And the overarching theme there was the opportunity lies in proactively cultivating and equipping the workforce with essential skills that they need to make the industry future ready. So in developing talent, there's an awful lot of ambition in the industry. 61 of professionals strongly agreed that their work is more than just a job, while 40% strongly disagreed with the notion that they work solely for money. It reflected passion and enthusiasm within the industry. And additionally, the industry demonstrates that 40% of the professionals were eager to be promoted. 40% wanted to be promoted. 64% of them think that they're more ambitious than their colleagues. Most notably, women have more of a desire for promotion than men. So, here are the barriers to preventing career advancement. Lack of clear growth and career paths, the communication of it was number one, followed by burnout and lack of mentorship. 38% lack of clear career paths. People want to be promoted. They're struggling to understand what that career path is. And of course, we know there are a lot of small companies within the industry, and we'll get into how companies can help with that. They do feel burnout. They feel overworked. A lot of them really talked about having the resources to succeed at their jobs. So one other thing that I want to show you here are the ways in which companies are developing talent. And I'll never forget when I showed this slide to the two of you, because the first thing that you said was looking at the top, where it says that 50% offer feedback and reviews. And the first thing they said is, oh my God, 50% of US companies don't? So it's a weakness along with onboarding. It's a big weakness. And then understanding work-life balance needs of our employees is another one. So there's a clear opportunity for us as an industry. And I have some questions for the panelists about it. So I'm going to show you just the piece here. So one of the clear areas of weakness for our industry was onboarding, and Kristen and Beth and I had a conversation about it. So Kristen, I'm going to go to you first.
Okay.
For onboarding, you said that you have a plan that is day one, week one, month one.
Yes.
Talk about that.
So several years ago, one of our team members, I think it was our director of marketing, when she started onboarding someone new on her team, she put together a first day, first week, first month plan. And in that first day, it clearly spelled out, here's what you're going to do on your first day. Then it was, here's what we're going to accomplish, and here's what my goals are for you for the first week. Then here's what you were going to, tasks, accomplishments, meetings, and goals for the first month. And then you could go beyond that, and then sometimes we had first 6 months. And we kind of stole the idea and now have used it for almost every new team member coming on board, because one, it forces us as a supervisor to say, well, what are my goals for this person? And what are we going to do, and how do I onboard them, and what tools and resources are they going to need so that we can bring them into our culture and bring them into the company and they understand. And two, it gives that person joining your team some direction and also some understanding that they're not expected to know everything day one. And so now all of a sudden it's, well, who am I going to meet with? And then that forced us to set up meetings ahead of time to say, we want you to understand every department and what they do. So we've preset all these meetings for you to sit down with each department to understand how they contribute to the whole and how what you're doing will contribute to what they're doing and vice versa. And we set up sometimes meetings with our franchise owners, or we set up time to say, okay, during this time you're going to review something as simple as our membership agreement, and then we're going to do a follow-up on what that includes, and what questions you have, and here's when you're getting the technology training, and here's where you can find all these resources. Because just sitting there going, oh, well, it's over here and it's on our portal and you click here and you do that, there's just too much going through that person's brain the first month of their employment. So having a reference sheet for them has proven very helpful. And obviously the first week is more detailed than like week 2, week 3, week 4, but it at least forces everyone to have some direction and focus and think before someone comes in. And then it helps us set people up for success. And generally speaking, it's led us to good results with, once someone comes, they tend to stay.
Yeah. And Beth, you and I spoke about onboarding on a budget, because there are technology platforms that can help. They do cost money, but we talked about kind of how you could do it on a budget.
Sure. Well, I mean, Kristen, that idea is great, and it works on a budget too. And it really makes someone sure they want to hire somebody, because that's a lot of work for them too. And it's not just a person they're hiring this big part of their team. So I applaud all that all day long. So we care a lot about onboarding. When I got to BringMax 3 years ago, it was the loudest complaint in every onboarding meeting I had with different parts and departments. They all said, our onboarding is terrible, it's too inconsistent, we don't know if the store is doing it the same as team support, we don't know if the manufacturing is doing it the same as the marinas, and it was, people weren't getting computers and all kinds of things, and it wasn't anybody was trying to make it bad, it's just that every manager kind of was in charge of doing it themselves, and we weren't giving clear guidelines, this is how we believe a new team member should be onboarded. And that's the first step. Whether you have money to spend or you don't, you need to decide, what do you want your newest team members to learn about your company, about your culture, your mission, your values, the way you consider professional dress to be. I mean, something so simple that you take it off the table because you tell people.
Where you can store your lunch.
That's right.
Very important.
Where can you buy lunch? Where do you store it? Are you supposed to clean the kitchen when you're done? Yes. Anyway, all those things. But if you instill that early on, and you have a list even of just what you want to make sure everybody hears, and you want everybody to hear the same consistent message and to have the same experience, because it's a shared experience. We've been lucky to build a class. We hired some learning development professionals, and we built a class for all of our team, because I want the person in Minneapolis to hear the same thing as the person in Naples. And I want the person in Oconto, Wisconsin to hear the same thing as the person in Clearwater. No matter what your role is, we want you to learn about our company the same way. And then another thing we did that doesn't really cost anything except someone's time, and I know how valuable CEO time is, but our CEO, we were doing it monthly, now we're doing it quarterly, meets all of our new team members in a Zoom meeting. In my old company, I did this in person, but this is a different time, and we can use tools to our advantage. And once a month, it's an hour-long session. Brett is a super nice guy. I love for people to get to know the CEO of a $2 billion business, because they'll realize I can be that one day. And they get to hear his story. He talks about our company, our values, and then we open it up for questions. And I mean, we hear everything, and it shows people that no question is too small. People ask Brett what he eats for breakfast, what's his workout routine, what kinds of books does he like, how did he go from IT to something else? They ask everything. What's the future look like? What's my job going to be in 10 years? I mean, people are not afraid if you give them a chance to talk and ask questions. And how great that they now feel this connection with the other people that were on that call, and also with the leader of our organization. And if you're a small company, you can take somebody to coffee. You can bring in lunch one day in the office, and you can do that same thing. It doesn't have to be super formal, but just that personal connection matters so much.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
consistency.
Yeah. My next question is, are there ways that leaders of small companies could prepare people for promotion and career growth? It's not that everyone's a large public company with the stepping ladders, and you're a manager, and then you're a managing director, and it moves up. So, Eric, you had talked about evaluation programs as a stepping stone for that.
Yeah, we've really tried to evolve our performance management review process to be less about judgment of the way you do your job, and more a two-way conversation about what's working well and where there are opportunities either for us to learn more about what that individual's future plans are, but also like where do they want to go, and an opportunity to communicate. We're a small company, So there aren't necessarily like layers that you can go through, but even within the same role, there's still opportunity for development and for showing that you're learning more. So we're trying to articulate those more to people more clearly to say like, okay, well, if you're on the customer service team, well, here are kind of thresholds or waypoints that you can process through where you show that you're achieving certain knowledge gains, and then how do we turn that? We haven't gotten quite to the point of lining that right up with compensation, but that I think is our long-term goal, is to show people not only how can they progress in terms of their roles, but also in terms of how does that come back in terms of their compensation. But I think having the review be less about the manager talking at the employee, and almost flip that around and use that as, I mean, there's obviously stuff that you want to communicate, and there may be areas where you want to make sure you're telling people where you want them to focus, but at the same time listening about where do you want to go in your career? Are there other areas of the company that you're curious about? How are there ways that we can expose them to something, whether it's going to turn into a new job tomorrow, or in some cases we've learned that someone has an interest in a different department that we would have never thought to ask, and we go, oh, whoa, we have a succession thing coming over there. Someone from customer service wants to go into purchasing, like, let's figure out how we can connect those two departments. And in our company, sometimes there's a little friction between those departments. So is that a way that you can actually get someone to understand both sides of that and still be setting them up for the future? So when you're a smaller company, I think sometimes you have flexibility and a nimbleness if you're creative about how can you listen to what your employees want and where they want to go, and then get creative with your team about how can we get them closer to that on the way.
Yeah, it's amazing in the review process how few people actually flip it around and ask them what they want.
We're still, like, this is still, we have people that are literally afraid of reviews. They're like, it's just a bad experience. I get wound up before it, the managers don't like it, and we're really trying to change the whole process to say like, hey, let's do them more frequently, let's make them more of a conversation and less of an evaluation. We don't use point system, we don't use like all that stuff. It's just like yuck. I don't want people
don't tie it to
judged.
pay. Don't tie it to
No,
pay.
we actually completely separate
Good.
compensation discussions from performance discussions. Sometimes the individuals kind of bring it in, and we try and push it off as best we can, but that our goal would be to have those different times in the year.
Because then you have a real conversation with the employee,
Right.
not a what's the money look like.
Right.
Yeah.
And Joe, you talked about evaluation as well. And you said pretty much in terms of it not just being annual, you agreed with Eric.
Definitely, and it's almost at odds with the conversation about retention, which I think can dominate our mentality too much. I'll tell you a story. If I joined a medium-sized organisation as the commercial director, I got to the end of my 3-month probation period and got called in to go and see the chief exec. I thought, it's all gone okay. And I was asked, so what can I do to help you leave? And I thought, oh, I've been found out already. A bit longer. And she said to me, you're doing really well. I can see you're ambitious. I don't think this organisation is big enough for you. What can I do to help you get to that next step?
Wow.
I've never been so motivated, energized, or worked so hard for her. And our reviews became quarterly reviews, and the conversations were about, okay, what do you want to do next? What can I teach you? What do you want to experience? And it wasn't a, this is what you're doing wrong conversation, or this is what I want you to do better. It's, what can we do to help you? And I think certainly for the small to medium-sized organizations, you have to recognize that you have a choice. You can retain everybody doing the same things that they've always done the same way, or you can see them thrive, encourage them to grow, knowing that many of them will leave. Some of them will come back with more experience and more value. All of those that leave will be evangelists for working in your organization, and that's worth a lot more. There's an old adage, isn't there? The chief exec and the CFO talking. And the CEO said, we need to invest in staff training. And the CFO said, well, imagine if we trained all those people, spent money on them, and they all left. And the CEO said, well, imagine if we didn't. And they didn't. You don't want to be stuck with a stable workforce. grow your team as much as you can, encourage their development within, or if need be, without of your organisation. And I think everyone will be much better off as a result.
It's the difference between innovation and stagnation. Yeah. Kristen, you had a lot to say on small business and how they could help promote.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, well, we are a large nationwide organization. We are a franchise organization. So our corporate headquarters falls into the small business category. So, while we have 50 people on our team, 25 of them are in our call center. So the other 25 do everything. And I just to follow up on evaluations, I think you said turn the table. One thing that's been very successful for us was the employee, the team member, fills out their own evaluation first. And it's amazing how hard people are on themselves, but also how open they are. So number one, it turns it into a great conversation because you can totally flip the script now and say, look, actually, I think you're actually doing great in this area, and I think you're spot on with areas of improvement, so how can I help you do that? And it changes the whole dynamic of the conversation with that team member doing it first. And asking, one of the questions we have is, do you feel like you have the tools and resources to do your job effectively? And and then it also becomes very interesting because you see who's responding in what way, who really takes the time to put it together and who doesn't. And it's fun. I have one team member who does an extremely good job of keeping track of all of her accomplishments the entire year. Literally keeps a running list the entire year. So when we sit down annually, and it's just written in a notebook, here's all the things I've done, and I've done well, and I've accomplished, because it makes her feel great about what she's done. But it also reminds me as her supervisor, yeah, you're right, you did do all that. Wow, it really has been a full year, and where we want to go. And to follow up on the how do you help people grow, we have really tried to encourage people along the way to educate themselves, take advantage of opportunities, attend conferences, and do those things, and invited them into meetings and other situations that they might not normally have been invited to. I just went to the Salesforce Dreamforce conference 2 weeks ago. Our VP of Tech went, I went, and we brought our software support specialist. And for years, we've been telling him why it's so important that he gets the Salesforce certifications. He's like, he knows it all, just take the test. We'll pay for the test. Because at some point, as much as he's not allowed to leave because he's fantastic, he probably will leave at some point. And it's important for his career growth. Again, the same thing, over time, God forbid his wife gets a job somewhere else and he has to move. We want to encourage those pieces. And he went to that conference and all of a sudden he was telling us, I want to lead these projects. I want to do this. Here's what I want to learn. And I'll take the test next week. And he got it. And it was an investment on our part, but it encouraged him. We have other team members that, we invite them to a strategy session, and all of a sudden they get super engaged and come up with ideas we hadn't thought of because they have a fresh perspective. And then they're like, well, can I do this? Can I do that? And you don't realize what everyone's really capable of until you give them the opportunity. And as someone who's really bad at delegating, it's also become a way for me to say, okay, let me bring in these younger team members and try to dump my brain to them and give them the opportunity to learn and be successful and grow with it. And a prime example is we brought someone in on our data team who's going to be doing data processing and membership, and realized how much he enjoyed data analytics. And he spends an inordinate amount of time doing all this self-training on data analytics. And in 9 months, he's gone from being data entry and membership to being a data analyst, having learned Power BI, implementing it across the whole company, rolling out dashboards for all of our franchisees. We're paying for certifications, we're paying for courses.
What's his name?
Don't mind. But I think that's all important to invest in people and give them an opportunity, because you'd be shocked how much they'll actually grow and do.
So unfortunately, our time is nearing an end. We promised you a gift and a challenge today. So our gift to you is if you go to tradeonlytoday.com/workplace-study and you put in this code, you will get 15% off of the price of the full 40-plus page report that we've done that breaks all of this down by age, gender, and such. And our challenge to you is as companies start to use this data and implement some of these changes into their companies, we would encourage you to use the hashtag #STOWorkChallenge. We want to hear what you're doing based on the study data. And you never know, you might be contacted by Gary Rich as we follow up and see how people are using the data, and it's some publicity for you. In terms of what's next, you will see articles on workforce on each of the different parts of the study coming in Trade Only. We're going to let you digest this in the fall through the holidays, and then as we start into 2025, you'll start to see this, and you'll start to see some other media content as well that has to do with this data and gets more into the how. So there are recommendations within the report, but as we dive deeper into how do you do this, we want to make sure that we provide really, really good tools to everyone within the industry. So I want to thank Beth and Eric and Matt and Kristen and Joe for being part of the panel. I want to thank all of our sponsors that are up here: Imtra, Marine Max, Volvo Penta, MRAA, Icomia, NMMA, Yamaha, and Marine Industry News. A special thank you to Amanda, who I think we've been, it's been endless hours and 9 months of a journey to get this done for you guys. And we're going to open it up for some questions if anybody has questions, or if you're like, it's 5:56 and I'm due for a cocktail, we totally understand. Any questions?
To know a little bit more about the evaluation process. What was it like for the employees to go through that, especially being on a production facility? A lot of my employees don't speak English or they don't have access to computers. So how were you able to roll that out for your teams?
Well, it's different for us in different places. So for our manufacturing locations, the evaluation process looks a little different. Like you've mentioned, you're not always at a computer all day. You don't have time to do a self-evaluation, or maybe it's not part of it. Paper still works. Paper is a real thing, and you can give people evaluations in their language if you want them to do a self-evaluation. If you need a translator to do an evaluation, that's important as well. We have to do that in some of our sites. We have one manufacturing site that has 128 Vietnamese speakers. Not a common language to get things translated into, and we've been very consistent about trying to translate all the benefits information, all the onboarding information, and we have to bring in folks to help sometimes with that kind of feedback. Yeah. But paper works too, and it really is important to have a written record or a technological record of what you said, because you want to be able to look back at it. You want the employee to be able to look back at it. Like, these are the 3 things my boss said that are an opportunity, or these are the 3 things that I do really well that I want to double down on. You know, those kind of things matter. And I think making sure you still have that feedback loop really matters. And then making sure that, as you all have said, that you're also asking for feedback during that process. What can I do to make your job better? Or what can I do to help you succeed? But you guys probably have more ideas than we do.
That's great.
No, and just for clarification, I'm sorry, that would be for the trade-only assessment as well, the evaluation?
Oh, how did our evaluation go?
Yes. No, I
Okay.
appreciate
I can volunteer, though, that we could get some things translated if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, we can do some translations. Our evaluation, we worked with 2 professional research firms that helped us go through raw data, because we had over 700 answers to the survey. We also had the transcripts of all of the focus groups, and we worked with a professional researcher who helped us dissect it down into what the high points were. So I'm happy to share with you her contact information if you're interested.
Michelle, wasn't manufacturing, like on the floor, was one of the larger respondents to the survey too?
Yeah, it really went across the board, and we give you a bunch of detail on who responded, what titles they had, what functions they have within the report.
So it was all done in English, but it's a
Yeah.
good portion, like a portion of the respondents were in manufacturing.
So sorry, I misunderstood.
You spoke earlier a bit about some of the screening processes and seeing when you get applicants through electronically, how do you sift through this data? I run a very small marine service company in Tortola, British Virgin Islands, and what we have to go through to recruit and bring staff in, we have to invest thousands of dollars in work permit fees and all sorts of stuff, only to find out maybe a person's not fit for living in the islands. It's not up to everybody's, it's not everybody's cup of tea. Is there any tips you could give me or advice on things to look out for, or maybe better ways to interview people to try to, I guess, pre-screen people better?
I don't want to be in your spot.
I mean, I think. Yeah, I think you have to have several layers. I think of interviewing. We do our process. We use is we start with obviously a cursory review of their resume to make sure it looks at least like they can do the job. Then we do a phone interview where we have them tell us what they do, how they do it, what they like, what they dislike, and that sort of thing. And it really gets them to talk about the role so that we know that they're a good fit for that role and that they can actually do the job. And then when we bring them in, we have a very comprehensive approach that we use for interviewing and how we do it. So I stole it from Marine Max, to be honest with you. So it was called Top Grading.
Top Grading,
And if you want, the book itself has probably about 100 questions in the back of the book that are interview questions that are more about the individual's character. Because once you can identify that they can do the job, now you need to know if they're a good fit for the company.
Right.
And so you can go through, like you can target specific characteristics, like are they resourceful, and that sort of thing, and drill down and build out. So we build out our hiring team. Everybody on the hiring team will have 10 to 15 questions that are seeking to make sure that they have these specific characteristics. And it's a really powerful tool.
These are technical people.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we tried to have them actually shoot video of a guy welding in
Sure.
Philippines to see the quality of the weld.
Yeah, sure.
Always looking for kind of new ideas.
Yeah.
When you met somebody like that, because you don't get the chance to just bring them in and try them out for a week and
Right.
see you're a few grand before you even get to that.
I do love that idea of testing them on
Yeah.
what they can do. We haven't quite figured out exactly how to do it, but I think it's a really important step.
In other industries and at Marine Max, we sometimes give them a project, or like you said, to have someone video them actually doing their job is really great if you're allowed to do that. But if you assign some type of small project, you're not getting work for free. This isn't an idea that you're offloading something that you should be doing, but something that matters to that type of work. We give a CPA test for accountants, not an actual CPA exam, but a small 10-question test, and you'd be shocked at how many accountants apply and miss 7 of the questions. That gives us a quick answer right there. Good. Yeah. It is. It is.
And this might be a question for Marie, Max, and Matt, but to follow up, like you have the bigger challenge of they might be a great technical fit, but are they going to want to live in the islands?
Yeah.
That's right.
And I don't know how big the team is, but I feel like I remember listening to a whole presentation about personality testing that Marie Max did at one point.
We do.
And looking through, are they a good fit? Do they have the personality? Do they have the characteristics of someone who's going to want to move to this small island in the middle of the Caribbean with potentially limited resources?
Right.
We do partner with a company called Talogy, who owns the Caliper exam, and it shows people's just natural behaviors that are comfortable for them, and then those behaviors that might take them a little more energy to portray. And it has been a useful tool for us. It started long before I got there. I think we've been using it about 15, 20 years. And it doesn't tell you someone's right or wrong for a role, but it can show you their natural, again, behaviors around different aptitudes: thoroughness, urgency, empathy, aggressiveness, assertiveness, all kinds of things that matter in different types of roles. And it can give you an idea of questions to ask them. And that really is what the caliper leads us to. Like, if we can figure out, let me ask enough questions to make sure this person can work in the sun all day, or be in a finance job where they have to be very detailed, or perhaps, have to interact with customers that might not be happy all the time. You can imagine a service manager needs empathy, but also needs to be able to make decisions and move on. So I don't know if that could help, but I'd be happy to talk with you. We have a facility in Tortola, and that's right.
I think the thing I would add on to that is that, look, you've got all these different things, right? We do a profiling, Omnia profile assessment as well. And what you're doing is you're making them get a commitment that they're really interested in the job.
That's
and they
the
won't,
biggest part of it.
Yeah. You may put them through some steps like that, and it proves they're really interested.
So I think we're on our final question, if anybody has one. And then we've got to go. They're going to kick us out.
Get a dinner date. So on the job dissatisfaction, if you will, charts,
Yes.
all of the gender differences resonate with me. They make sense. I get them all, and I see them all, except for one that I can't get my head around, and I wonder if there's something behind the data.
Okay.
And that's why, why would females in the workplace overwhelmingly more than their male colleagues feel burnt out? All the others make sense to me, right? Pointing out your gender unnecessarily, your clothing unnecessary. These things happen to women in all industries and all workplaces. I don't understand the burnout one, and it's hugely disparate. I mean, it's 22% of men say they feel burnt out, or you're right, and 37% of women.
Yeah.
So I don't get it. Is there anything behind that data? Because it makes me suspect of the rest of it.
Oh,
No.
there's a ton of research
Not that
around.
it's not legit. It's just
Yeah.
what's happening.
It's understandable that it's a good question because it is so different. But there is a ton of research that has shown that the bulk of life organization and home responsibilities, and getting the kid to school, and getting the kid to soccer practice, and getting the kid to the doctor. I'm not saying it's all accurate, but there's a lot of research that shows that a larger percentage of that kind of daily logistical work falls on, unfortunately, the mom a lot of the time in the relationship. It doesn't mean it's across the board. It doesn't, I'm hoping not being too controversial, but it's out there. The data's there. And it doesn't mean that, like, my husband's a great help. We partner in it, and we're both stressed out. But I do think that for a lot of folks, it can be just this extra weight that they carry all day.
Thank you.
And it wears you out at work, too.
Thank you. And I was hoping that somebody would present that answer, because I think it has more to do with life in society, of which work is part of life in society. But that's a huge disparity. And it's not, I guess.
I think it ties also to the feeling that women gave us, that they stated within the data. I think it's a frustration also that they're not moving up like they want to. So those opportunities to grow within their roles. So there's the frustration, and then there's not having the resources to do what they need to do. And some of it, too, is a lack of understanding of some of the jobs. I'm going to pick on Danny, who's next to you, but marketing used to be that you placed an ad in a magazine and that was it. Now all of a sudden it's ad in a magazine, it's social media, it's e-blast, it's full product lines, it's messaging. There's so much more in what was a fairly simple role 15, 20 years ago. And there are a number of roles that are getting that way as well. I mean, I met with someone who was a service writer at a marine dealership, she said, I'm in tears all the time. And I think that organizations got pretty lean at certain points, or the pandemic happened and all of a sudden there was so much work. But being able to find employees and employ them and train them during the pandemic when the industry was crazy busy, that was happening as well. And now on the downturn, they're not adding any employees either. So you've got people that might be doing more work than they had originally thought that they would be doing, or taking on additional roles. But we have lean organizations and they're not getting bigger. And they're burning out, and they're burning out quickly.
I also wonder, Michelle, if it would be interesting to look at the data by age.
Me too.
And see if there's, because I do feel like there's some generational differences.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely, and this is my personal anecdotal
The
observation,
sandwich
but I feel like
generation.
the younger generations, like women are just not tolerating it anymore. And you're seeing more men say, I'm going to take parental leave too, where it used to be only, it used to be, women only. Like
It's good
there's-
for
I think
women,
there's
for
a
men to
change.
have it too, just to be clear. It is
Yeah.
really good for women
Yeah.
for men to also have parental leave, so that maybe the
Absolutely.
mom
Oh,
goes back to work.
100%.
Yeah.
I think it's the right thing. It's
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
but
it's
it changes
100% the right
things.
thing, but you're seeing that change. So I wonder if generationally there is a statistical difference in the answers.
Yeah. And Alan, I can tell you, I am so exhausted looking all of the numbers and the data. There is no way that data is wrong. I have been through it with a fine-tooth freaking comb.
Sorry, Gary.
True. I agree with you.
It is, it's life, it's not just a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also don't think, I think if you think burnout is only about what's happening at work,
Right.
you're missing a whole thing.
yeah.
Like, and it's not just females versus males. Like, what's going on in people's life impacts their work. And while it may not be your problem, if you can be empathetic and understanding, that's gonna make people, sometimes work can be an oasis for people who are having difficult things going on in their life. And I think, you don't need to get in everyone's personal business. I mean, there's a fine line there, but also being open to the fact that when people are going through things, they almost can't not bring that to work, So just being aware, if you see anyone who's seeming burnt out or seeming like particularly frustrated, if you can ask what's going on, and maybe you have an HR team that can do it. Obviously you got to kind of be
Well, and
respectful.
we did a great data-driven virtual seminar that we videotaped that you can log in and see on avoiding burnout. That was really well done.
It's great.
I actually just want to add on to something that Alan said, and he hit on it toward the end of it. If you look at all that data, right, and women are saying at a higher percentage that they're getting talked over, or they're getting moved over, or someone is taking credit for their work, or all of those things that women in this study are saying, that could all contribute to that burnout. Because when you work your fingers to the bone constantly and then potentially have someone else take the credit or talk over you or question your ability in a role that you are very well qualified for. And I'm not at all saying that anyone in this room is doing that. I am saying, if you look at those numbers across the board, they're all high. Of course they're burning out at a higher rate. So, but you said that, you started to say that as I was like, can I help out? So you got there. But I just wanted to sort of clarify that, yeah.
Well, thank you guys for sitting in this hot room with us. We so appreciate it. I hope you found the data very interesting. And again, the landing page is live. Go look at it. It's tradeonlytoday.com/workplace-study.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.